My name is Jordan Graham, and I got started with racing motorcycles at about 3 years old when my dad put me on a mini bike and I went through the backyard fence and hit the neighbor's dog. I think from there it kind of took off. So I have been racing the Super Hooligan series for 5 years now, and have been pretty much on the podium every year at the end of the championship. And going into 2020, we had COVID hit and basically canceled any and all racing for everybody. And we went out and raced the Mint 400. I won by 45 minutes in the Hooligan Open class. And after that, the National Hare and Hound and AMA came to us and said, you know, we want you guys to continue racing with us. What can we do? So we were actually able to go out in the desert and race. It was basically the only form of any V-twin racing, any racing period. So it was pretty cool to actually have a spot and go out and beat up your friends on V-twins. What I like about it is being at such a disadvantage on such a heavy motorcycle that wasn't developed for off-road in the first place challenges you a lot more than being on a run-of-the-mill dirt bike. It's pretty satisfying passing dirt bikes all day long on something that weighs double of what they're on. What I've learned racing a V-twin on flat track, whether it's dry, wet, loose, it transfers right over. I find myself coming into a dry leg bed twice as fast as everyone else because as a flat tracker, I see this big, nice flat area and I'm in this insane drift thinking it's the coolest thing in the world, you know. The National Hare and Hound series in 2021 has been pretty damn good for me. Heading into September, we start back up and hammer the last 4 rounds out pretty close together within a month. So I'd like to have a perfect season all the way through, but I'm not one to jinx myself, so we'll let that one play out. I'd like to finish that out and win the championship, so that's kind of our goal. I'm set on it. Finish that up with a #1 plate and go win the Mint 400 again. Off-road racing started on V-twins, 40s, 50s, 60s. Everybody was on V-twin Harley Davidsons, then it transferred over to all the British bikes in the 60s. I see off-road racing going back to its roots, and it's pretty cool to see OEM manufacturers getting behind actual riders like me that just love racing motorcycles. Being able to get with a bunch of people that are getting into the sport and being able to transition them into wanting to race off-road is super cool, and I don't think it's going anywhere. I think it's only going to grow. The most exciting event of the year is the Mint 400, undoubtedly. The atmosphere going down Main Street in Vegas on your race bike and all the off-road trucks and the spectators that show up to the Mint 400s like no other, you know. Usually we go out to the middle of the desert and it's just a bunch of racers. I grew up in the country. I grew up shooting squirrels and targets and running around the hills with my dog. I've only grown my collection. It's fun to take an old gun and restore it, or take a new gun and do all my own gunsmithing. And I like taking my old guns that I've had since I was 6, 7 years old and fully restoring them and Cerakoting them and doing all the work myself. And it's gratifying for me, and being able to hand that down to my kids is a pretty cool thing. So I've got a pretty broad range of rifles in my collection, and I've got a pretty good selection of pistols. I'd say my favorite things to do are lever actions. Lever guns are the raddest thing ever. I like putting a modern twist on some lever rifles. So at a young age, I was kind of inspired by all the 70 and 80-year-old hot rod guys. You know, I watched American Graffiti, and I think from there, when I was probably about 12, 13 years old, it was over with. Found myself weed whacking a lady's farm for a 1931 Ford Model A body, and I basically started building my first car at about 14 years old. Once I was in that mindset, I mean, I've never been able to shut off. I'm constantly building stuff. I've got 5 different car projects right now. I've got a muscle car, a gasser, and 2 hot rod projects that I'm working on at the moment, and it's kind of gratifying to be able to build something and go race it, or build something and take it to a car show. And for me, it's broadening my fabrication skills. Like anything else that I do, whether it's fabricating racing motorcycles or building guns, I always want to do the best I can.